Welcome to the College Football Preview Show presented by Yolked. I'm your host, John Sarianides. And as always, I'm joined by our lead college football writer, Ryan Barry. Ryan, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. I'm down the Cape this week, coming home this weekend for the UMass Central Connecticut State game, but happy to be here talking college football and happy to be here with you.
Awesome. Same here, brother. Happy to be on with you talking some college football. And before we get started here, do want to remind you that we are brought to you by Yolked. If you're looking for a safe protein supplement to add to your workout to help enhance your workout, well, that's Yolked. At only 47 calories a packet, Yolked tastes like birthday cake. It is a fantastic protein supplement to your workouts. It's safe and effective. It's safe for athletes, high school athletes, college athletes, and adults. If you're looking to add protein to your workout and you want something that tastes good and is effective, that's Yolked. Visit yolked.com today for more information. All right, we're going to do a quick recap of the weekend that was, and then we want to look ahead to the games because, of course, the Ivy League kicks off this weekend as well, so we want to talk about those schools and look ahead to their games. Just some thoughts starting off with BC and Missouri Eagles drop a 27-21 decision to the Tigers. Look, early on, they looked really good. I thought to myself, are they going to go in there and win this game, beat the number 6 team in the country? The formula was right. The game plan was good. What did them in ultimately was they gave up a couple big plays defensively. Castellanos throws the 2 picks. But I will say this, and I know Eagle fans don't want to take solace in this, but you know what? There is no such thing as moral victories. But if I'm a Boston College football fan, and to a degree, the same can apply if you're a UConn football fan after this weekend. But if I'm a BC football fan, I think there's a lot of positives to take from this game. I've said it all along. If they start their season off 3-1, 4-0, that's a really good start to the first quarter of the season. I think there were a lot of positives to take away from that game.
Yeah, the only disappointment I think is just, you kind of almost had this thought like, oh man, like we're up, we have we're leading, and they looked like they were playing the part. Right? It looked like kind of like, oh, this is old school BC here. Like they are going to be able to beat these teams, and of course, Missouri showed that they're the talented team they are and kind of came back. But if I'm a BC fan, I'm still encouraged. I'm still like, hey, we hung with this team, we were winning, and I don't know if you can be at that level yet where you're expecting them to win every single game, right? But I think there is a change in expectation, like, oh, we're hanging with these teams, so when we get to ACC play, we should be beating teams, right? Like we shouldn't be dropping heartbreakers because we can win these ones. I mean, you look at the stats, they didn't really run the ball too well, which is, kind of discouraging because, even Castellanos didn't really run too well. So those are the discouraging things, but the defense just didn't make the big plays when they need them to. But I think you've got to be excited if you're an Eagles fan still, right? I would still be like, okay, you can be let down a little bit, but still be like, just remember, like, hey, remember where we were last year, right? Remember a 6-point loss to Missouri last year would have been like the Super Bowl. So,
yeah, and I think, look, I mean, you got a big one this week, obviously. Saturday night, they're going to be hosting Michigan State in the Red Bandana game. Game will be on ACC Network, nationally televised. The game is sold out. We're going to get to that game in a few minutes here. But again, you went toe-to-toe with an SEC team, a team that's going to compete in the SEC West. So I think that this was a good showing by Boston College. Again, I'm not sure the program is there yet, and there's no such thing as moral victories, but there's enough there that you can take from that game, carry it over to this weekend, and possibly beat a good Michigan State team. I mean, the Spartans are coming in 3-0 under first-year head coach Jonathan Smith. It'll be a really good game. Weather could be a factor. Looks like we're finally going to get some rain tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday. So, but nonetheless, look, a lot of positives to take from the game if you're Boston College. The only thing I'll say is you hope that Castellanos, you hope it doesn't affect him too much. You hope he doesn't revert to some of the bad decision-making that we've seen from him at times in the past. You hope that he's able to go back, watch the film, learn from it, and eliminate those same mistakes moving forward. Not a good weekend for the alma mater. Tough 38-3 loss to Buffalo. I don't even really know where to begin, and I said this to Kevin Stone the other night. It's just, I'm not going to sit here and say that they've hit rock bottom, but they just seem to be inching closer to rock bottom. It's just so hard to figure out this football program. And it's so hard. Mike Trion from Fight Massachusetts talked about this a little bit on Monday about Don Brown's body language, and does it give you some insight as to how he feels about this season? Look, when you lose everybody has bad body language. I don't care what the sport is, but especially in football, because you're only playing once a week. You put so much effort into the preparation process, but they were in this game, Ryan. I mean, they had a shot at halftime, and then they give up 17 points in the third quarter. Floodgates open, and they get blown out. Some thoughts on the alma mater's loss?
I think it's just frustrating on a whole host of levels. But when you talk about, Don's body language and things like that, I think they're kind of almost had this feel like I can understand it to an extent where you're looking at it. I think he's so angry that he's just kind of almost despondent in a way. I don't think there's a lack of care. I don't think there's a like, oh, I don't care about this. I think it's more just like, I don't know what to tell you, man. We lost 34-3 to a team that we thought we'd beat. I think it's.
Did I add to their total, by the way? I think you're right. It was 34-3.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I think I said 38-3. My bad.
Oh, okay. No. Yeah. So I just think it's more just the man, like what the heck what can we do here? Right. I mean, I know they were missing Anthony Simpson, Dominic Mazzotti, but those guys didn't do too much the week before either, right? Against Toledo, and you still hung better. Pumachan's, almost Mac Jones-like interception and just unable to run the ball has been a huge problem. And, we were talking a little before the show, and it's just frustrating where you're like, when this happened with Walt Bell or these other coaches, it just felt like, all right, you fire him and you start over. But with Don, it's like, but this was the guy you brought into that would stop all this. But the same stuff is still happening. And it really makes it feel kind of hopeless. Like on Saturday after the game, I'm down here with family. We're about to go out to dinner, and I'm up here like talking on the Twitter Spaces with the Outside Amherst guys and Mike Triani and all these guys saying, well, what the hell are we doing here, right? Because it's just so many people like, seriously, what the hell are you doing? Like, who do you hold accountable? Do you hold accountable the administration? People want to hold responsible the governor for not investing. It's broken on so many levels. That to single-handedly put it on Don, I think, is hard. But it's at the same time, there are some decisions that they do make that you're like, oh, that was kind of curious, right? But you can't just point your finger at one person. And I think that's what is making so many people so angry, is that there's not just one thing that they're just not doing week in, week out, right? It's systematic at every single level of the program for why it just stays like this. And I tweeted it too. You think back to how tough it's been for the last 12 years. There's so many times where, yes, there's lack of investment, lack of this, lack of that, but there's just so many games they were in that they just lose and they can't win, or they just do one thing and it flips the other way. And Buffalo on Saturday was that, but it was almost worse, where you're like, this wasn't the greatest quarterback you're going to play all season. You actually played a dual threat quarterback that you're struggling against last year. So it literally just kind of feels like you're in a hole and someone's taking the ladder and you can't climb out of it. And no one knows when someone's putting the ladder back in, and it's just, this was supposed to be the better part of your schedule. And I think there's a lot of I think maybe Don feels it too. I think there's a lot of him thinking, damn, these were our winnable games. We didn't win them, and we've got a really tough end of our season coming. So that's just kind of how I feel like where it's at.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point, man. I mean, you still have Missouri coming to town. You got to go to Georgia. I mean, that's just it. We've said this all offseason. If they're going to make hay, they had to do it in that first quarter of the season. You do have CCSU coming to town on Saturday, but that's not an easy game. Adam Lechtenberg has done a terrific job with the Blue Devils. They're coming off two straight wins over Fordham and St. Francis. St. Francis beat Kent State the week before. CCSU is a good football program. You got Brady Olson making his return to UMass. You got Elijah Howard, one of the best backs in the NEC, and really, from a statistical standpoint, he's been one of the best backs in FCS football the last couple of years. So this is not an easy game. We're going to get into it here in a little bit, but nonetheless, tough 34-3 loss. Again, I gave Buffalo some extra points. I think I gave UConn a couple extra points too earlier, but it's late. Whatever, my bad. Duke beating UConn 26-21. Look, I'm going to say the same thing I said about BC. I know UConn fans are frustrated. Mora, they start Nick Evers. They wanted Joe Fagnano. Evers played his best game so far as a Husky. Fagnano did come in at the end. There's no such thing as moral victories, but if you're a UConn fan, a lot of positives here. And now this is really the stretch that's going to determine their season. Their next 6 games are at home, which is, I don't know how you get a schedule like this. Yeah. It is ridiculous. But their next 6 games are at home. During that stretch, as of now, they're only playing one opponent with a winning record. So they have an opportunity to make some hay here. I'm going to say it. I don't care. when you're struggling as an FBS independent, you got to try to find positives everywhere. If I'm Jim Mora, Gordy Samus, this staff, Coach Brock on defense, a lot of positives here. You lost, but you could have won this game. There were a lot of good things to take away from it. I think this could now set up this UConn program to take advantage of winnable games in this stretch. I mean, they should come out of this stretch with 3 or 4 wins, in my opinion. They're trending in the right direction, are the Huskies.
Yeah, you can be cautiously optimistic, I think. I think that's totally fair. And, similar to BC, it's like, okay, but just remember where we were last year. Remember, like losing by 6 to Duke, who's been a very solid program in the ACC for a while, even with a new head coach, away by 6 points. I just keep thinking about how terrible that week 1 loss was to Maryland and where they're at already today. And I think you'd have to just have perspective. Now, if we're sitting here in 5 or 6 weeks and they keep losing like this, then yeah, it's time to be pissed and be like, well, what are we doing here? How come we can't close out these games? Because this is what we brought in Jim Moore to do, right? And I know that it's tough having 2 quarterbacks and you're not really quite sure, but a lot of programs would love to have a quarterback competition, right? Because a lot of them just don't even have one. So I think there is a perspective that they should have with that too. So if you're the Huskies, I think you've got to be optimistic regardless.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think the big thing is, as I mentioned, you've got to capitalize on this home stretch now. And I think if they do, they can position themselves to potentially be a bowl team. I mean, the back end of their schedule is not brutal. I mean, their next road game is in November at UAB. So they have a chance to make some hay here. And I think if you're Jim Mora, the schedule is set up nicely. You're coming off a competitive game. You're 1-2, but you could very easily be 2-1. Use this now as an opportunity to take this program where you want it to go. We'll preview their game against FAU here in a few minutes. Real quickly, going around New England before we do get into the previews, Holy Cross beating Bryant on Saturday. We were there for that one, 43-22. And congratulations to Dan Curran picking up his first win as the head football coach at Holy Cross. Unfortunately for the Crusaders, they do lose Jordan Fuller for the season with an injury. It's unfortunate because Fuller's been one of the best backs in the region the last couple of years. Jaden Clervaux, though, the former Everett star, he steps up. He had a big game. Holy Cross, of course, opens their season on Holy Cross returns home on Saturday to face Yale, who opens their season. So this is a big win, though. Holy Cross needed this one.
Yeah, congrats to Coach Curran. This is, I'm sure almost it feels crazy to say like a long time coming, even though it's just been 3 games, considering how close all 3 of those games were, or at least 2 of those games were before heading into it. So it's tough, especially losing Fuller. I hope, even though, it's crazy to look at it, but you hope maybe you can get a medical red shirt, come back next year, or maybe transfer to another program to get 1 more year of eligibility, go get a master's degree or something like that. But this is what we said last week. We said this was the type of game that they needed, and they did it. They handled their business. They got the win. It's tough for Bryant, but it's a reminder that again, Holy Cross is still a good program, and you hung with them decently overall. Could have been a lot worse.
They were up
right?
16-7 at one point.
Right. So I think those are the positives that they need to take with this transition year too. So I think that even though there's again no moral victories in these senses, but it's huge for Holy Cross, and losing Fuller is going to be tough because of the gauntlet they have this year. But I think with the Patriot League maybe not looking as strong as some thought, maybe it's not going to be as bad when we get into conference play. But, congrats to them.
Yeah, and you talk about Brian again. They knew this was going to be a long year. A lot of new faces, over 40 new guys. Jared Kessler, quarterback. He gave him a chance on Saturday. He played well enough. Brian, of course, goes to UNH on Saturday. As I mentioned, Holy Cross returns home to take on Yale. Speaking of UNH, they had a 45-6 win over Stonehill. Quarterback Seth Morgan tied a program record with 6 touchdown passes. He tied his head coach, Ricky Santos, who had 6 touchdown passes in a game. I think we all knew they were going to win this one. They took care of business. Caleb Moore, Joey Corcoran, both had big games through the air, ran the football enough. Defense did their job. Nice win for UNH. They needed this one. They did what they needed to do. They improved to 2-1 on the season.
Yeah. I think what's so impressive about that, especially shout out to yourself, you set the line at 21.5 points and they absolutely cashed that in. I was even like, oh man, that's a lot, but they just absolutely nailed it. So that's a shout out to yourself for that line there. But you're looking at this Wildcats team. You've got a pretty decent game this weekend against Bryant, and then you got a bye week, and you're starting your season 3-1. That's that's not where maybe a lot of people might have had them coming into this year with this team. So the fact that you've got Seth Morgan playing so well is massively encouraging for when you really get into the nitty gritty of the CAA this year. So, and it looked seamless. It looked like last year, and even last year they gave up a few more points to the Skyhawks, right? So when they beat them down in Easton. So I'm pleasantly surprised. I knew that they would have a decent season this year, but I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting here in mid-October and the Huskies are back ranked in the top 25. The Wildcats are ranked back in the top 25. So, Isaac Seed looked great. All the wide receivers that they have looked awesome with Corcoran and Tomlinson. So they're playing to the potential that I think a lot of people thought they could have, which is really, really awesome to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. And for Stonehill, they return home for their home opener on Saturday when they host Sacred Heart. We'll be there for that one as well. Speaking of Sacred Heart, we're going to get into them in a sec. They had a big 40-14 win over Georgetown. Staying with the CAA, though, Maine, tough 51-22 loss to Monmouth. I think the worst part of the loss is seeing former quarterback Derek Robertson come back to town and throw for almost 400 yards and 4 touchdown passes. He looked unbelievable. It had to be a bitter pill to swallow if you're Jordan Stevens and his staff watching that. I mean, look, with the portal, guys have options. They have other opportunities now. They can leave and go somewhere else. They lost a good one in Robertson, but he was a kid that was loyal to the program for a while, but man, did he put on a show in his return to Orono.
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing. I think you and I both definitely had Maine last week, being able to pull one out when a lot of people didn't think that Monmouth were, a middle of the road, CAA team this year. So it's curious that he went to Monmouth. Like I thought maybe he could have gone up to like a slightly bigger FCS program. But yeah, that's definitely tough to see because I think there's been a lot of momentum with the Black Bears so far this year. So to lose like that's kind of a kick in the teeth. Like, oh, wait a minute, have we made any steps forward this year? But they've got one this weekend coming up that could maybe help right the ship.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think still to have your former quarterback come back and do that, that's tough. And URI beating Campbell 21-9, quarterback Devin Farrell accounting for all 3 touchdowns, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. The Rams visit Long Island this weekend. Big win for them. They get back on track after losing 48-0 to Minnesota the week before.
Yeah, similar to kind of the Wildcats where they've got a decent enough schedule when you kind of just remove the fact that they, had to take that beat down in the Twin Cities. But Campbell's a decent team out of the Big Sky, or Big South rather, OVC. So, only holding to 9 points is pretty solid. And, to be able to beat Holy Cross, take care of business against Campbell, they should take care of business this weekend. And they're similarly sitting pretty, right? And I think that that's exactly where a lot of people weren't expecting them to be this year with a lot of turnover coming. So, yeah, again, that's a great place for them to be.
All right, just going over to the NEC real quick. We already talked about Stonehill and their loss to UNH. As I mentioned earlier, Central Connecticut beating St. Francis 27-20. Blue Devils are now 2-1 on the season. They travel to UMass. We'll talk about that one momentarily. FCS Independence, as I mentioned earlier, Sacred Heart with a big 40-14 win over Georgetown. Georgetown was previously undefeated. Given the way that Sacred Heart has played offensively the last 2 years, I wasn't sure we would ever see a game like this from them offensively. Kudos to the Pioneers. Big game for quarterback John Mikulski. He had a big game. Running back Xavier Lee had a big game. And the Pioneers picked up a much-needed win. They improved to 2-1 on the season. And it's a shame they're an independent because this is starting to look like a team, Ryan, that could have competed in the NEC.
Yeah, I feel bad because I feel like we've, last week we're really kind of not hammering them, but just definitely being like, oh, like what's going on after a really tough loss and, or rather a squeaky win against St. A's. So forcing 5 turnovers for the defense, right? This is like what we've talked about, how strong that their defense
is.
Always
right. They're always going to hang their hat on their D.
Right. So if they can continue that, they can keep themselves in games. And if, Mikulski can kind of figure things out, which is what they've been struggling with the last few years and find a consistent quarterback, they could be in a really decent spot. But like you said, having no conference is really the kind of kick in the teeth. So,
and of course, Merrimack went down to Bucknell and won 31-21. Congratulations to Coach Mike Giannetti on picking up his first win. Former Stonehill running back Jermaine Corbett had over 160 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown. Warriors return home this weekend to host Maine, a game that we will be at our Mukala Kabongo will be at that one. So some thoughts here for Merrimack. I mean, coming off a tough loss the week before after playing Air Force competitive in week 1. Nice bounce back win for Coach G and the Warriors.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was curious who was going to fill in at quarterback with McCusker going down and not really being in the best fitness. And it looks like Aiden Pereira has a job. He looked really good, 11 of 15, 147 yards and a touchdown. He's former Maine guy out of Central Catholic, the transfer. So it's awesome to see if he can really kind of figure things out. He's got a really strong arm. He looked really good in the spring game, I thought. With Donovan Wadley as an awesome, offensive weapon, they could be a really fun team if he can stay consistent, right? But I know that they've kind of had a hard time figuring out who that quarterback's going to be, with oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name for the other guy there. Gone. So really happy to see them kind of finding their stride there, and of course,
McCusker's the one that got hurt.
Yeah,
Pereira's in there now, right? It happened.
Yeah, Malachi Anthony.
Anthony's the other quarterback.
Boom, there we go. That's where it was. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on and preview this week's game, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. We're going to start off with the Boston College Eagles. BC is favored by 6.5 over Michigan State in the annual Red Bandana game. Of course, one of the highlights of the football season here in New England at any level. The Red Bandana game in recent years hasn't been the greatest of game for the Eagles, but man, there's a lot of hype surrounding this one. It's going to be on Saturday night at 8 p.m. Kevin Stone and myself will be there for that one. Game kicks off at 8 p.m. Undefeated Michigan State that comes to town. First-year coach Jonathan Smith, formerly of Oregon State. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, the Eagles are coming in off a tough 27-21 loss to Missouri. But honestly, though, Ryan, I haven't seen this much hype around this program in a long time. The BC fans are excited about it. BC football's become relevant again. I think a win over a good Michigan State team in the Red Bandana game, I think could really propel this program moving forward.
Yeah, I think the only thing that scares me for them is that it does feel like sometimes when BC gets in prime time, they sometimes don't, with momentum, they don't win these games, is my only fear for them. I don't know if it's the karma or bad juju or whatever, but it's like, hey, here we are, we're in a spot, and then they drop a game. But I think Michigan State should cover this, but I think BC will win this game. I really hope Castellanos doesn't get discouraged by those interceptions. I hope he keeps throwing the ball more. I want to see him use his arm more, not just, duck and run out of the pocket, right, when things get tough. So I'm definitely taking BC. I will take Michigan State to cover, but when you look at Michigan State's wins, 6 points over a really not that great FAU team, a very close win over Maryland, a rout of Prairie View, who's one of the weaker FCS teams. I think this is a team that kind of has an asterisk next to that 3-0 start. Red Bandana game, Saturday night under the lights. I'm going to lean the Eagles here.
Yeah, I'm going with Boston College too, and I think that they'll cover this number. I think that they win by more than 7. I think they win by 7 to 10. I think, look, Michigan State had a nice win over Maryland, but their other 2 wins are not great wins. First-year coach, a lot of new faces. I think Boston College has an identity again, and that identity, and this is what they were under Steve Adazio for a while, that identity is run the football, play good defense, and put your quarterback in a position where they don't make mistakes. And I think this is what they are. And even though Castellanos did throw the 2 picks last week against Missouri, I think this is a game that Boston College wins. I think they cover, and I think they use it as a springboard towards the rest of their schedule. Give me the Eagles in this one. I think they will make the alumni proud on Red Bandana night. And if nothing else, this is the biggest game for this program in the last 10 years. The last time I remember a game with this type of hype, and I'm not even sure that game had this kind of hype, was when USC, who I believe was 9th in the country at the time, came in here and Boston College beat them in 2014. So it's been a while since we've had a game with this kind of hype. You've had some games sandwiched in there. Clemson has come to town, is either the number 1 or 2 team in the country, Notre Dame. But I think this game is on par with that USC game. And this is an uncommon opponent. I mean, you don't play Michigan State at all. So, I mean, that this is a good opportunity for BC to make a statement win. All right, next up, the alma mater hosts Central Connecticut State on Saturday. There is no line on this game as of now, unless you saw one. I
haven't seen one yet.
So I'm going to give UMass. I'm going to make UMass the favorites here by 6.5. I think that's a big number, but a fair number. I'm going to make UMass the favorites here by 6.5. I think they cover. I think they win, but I don't think this is going to be a blowout. I think CCSU is going to be able to hang around for a while in this one.
Yeah, I think Brady Olson is Brady Olson. So when you look at his numbers, he's still, around that 50%, completion percentage, right? He still will turn the ball over if his first read's not there. He's got a couple picks, it seems like, every game. They have a great runner, right? Elijah Howard's awesome, but UMass has done pretty well against the run this year. So that's what makes me feel confident about it. The only thing that makes me nervous about a potential loss is if the offense for UMass just can't get going again. If, Pumachan is inconsistent, if they can't really run the ball, I think it could be lower scoring, but I do think that they can zero in on Olson. And I think that with their run defense they've had so far this year, I feel pretty confident about that. It's just, you want them they need a dominant win. They need to win like 40-14, right? To really just make people feel a little bit better. But I'm definitely taking UMass, and I'll definitely take them to cover as well. But there's a lot of people very nervous, very afraid about this. And I get that. But I do think that when you look at it, they should win. It's just these last 3 games have made us second guess ourselves. And no one would have thought that coming into the season, personally, if it wasn't for these 3 games they've just had.
Yeah. Oh, this is a winnable game. They should win. They're going to be favored. They should win. They should take care of business. They're the better team. Yeah. But again, I think CCSU is better than people thought at the beginning of the year. And then they had that ugly loss to open the season at Central Michigan. They've rebounded nicely. Like I said, Coach Lechtenberg has done a terrific job with that program. They're going to run the football with Elijah Howard. If Brady Olson can take care of the ball, their defense will get a couple of stops. Their defense may also force a couple of turnovers. That's what's going to keep them in the game. Ultimately, UMass is the better team. I think they win, but I think this game is going to be closer than people think. I think it's probably a 10 to 14 point game in UMass's favor. I think it'll be a lot like the Merrimack game was last year. I think this Central Connecticut State team is built very similar to that Merrimack team. Might have slightly better quarterback play, but I'm going to go with the Minutemen here. But I think this is going to be a closer game than people think. All right, next up we have UConn hosting Florida Atlantic University. Huskies are favored by 2.5. The over-under is 46.5. Look, it's bitten me in the ass in the past when I've been bullish on the Huskies, and I feel that this is a kind of game that is going to set me up for disappointment. I'm taking them here. I like the number 2.5. I could see them winning this game by a field goal to a touchdown. I'm going to take the Huskies here. I mean, Florida Atlantic is coming in 1-2. Obviously, UConn, big win at home 2 weeks ago against Merrimack. I think that they replicate the effort. They don't win by as much, but I think they should be able to cover what is a relatively small number.
Yeah. FAU's only win is over FIU, their neighbors down in Florida, who are a very, very challenged program, to put it lightly, right? So they lost by 17 to Army. They did lose by 6 to Michigan State at Michigan State, but I'm with you. I think this is UConn's game. I do think they need to figure out their quarterback situation. I think they need to run the ball a lot better, but I'm going to take them here too. I love 2.5. This strikes me as something, honestly, I could see them winning by like 10 if you get towards the end of the game where it's super, super close, but maybe they get a turnover and something like that happens. But I think this is going to start the run of games. I think they're going to feel a lot better after last week and be like, okay, let's handle our business. And it's a team that's more comparable for sure. So definitely taking the Huskies and to cover that.
Don't screw us over, UConn. Take care of business.
Yeah.
Take care of business.
Yeah, we need a program.
Take care of business.
We need a bounce back weekend for New England college football. Yeah,
we do. And these are games last year that you lost.
Right.
So don't screw us over. Take care of business and get the dubs.
Right.
Okay, because we're showing faith in you. We like this 6-game home slate. Make us look good. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go over to the CAA. URI visiting Long Island. The Rams are favored by 14. There's no line on this game. I'm making up the line, but I'm going to favor them by 14. Long Island is 0-3 on the season. The Long Island Iced Teas, I believe, is their nickname. No, actually, I think they're the Sharks. But In any event, URI should take care of business here. I think they cover by that number, although I will say, I think URI is not going to get into a lot of shootouts this year. It's going to be, they're going to win a lot of 10 to 12 point games if they're a heavy favorite because they're going to run the football, control the clock, lean on their defense. I think this game is kind of like that. 14 is a big number, but I do think they covered. Give me the Rams here that take care of business and they improve to 3-1 on the year.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to take Rhodey as well. There's some people that had LIU being a little bit better this year when I was researching this season because they were just kind of the whipping boy it felt like of the NEC last year. They got blown out by TCU, but they only lost by 6 to Albany, who's a pretty decent team in the CAA. Lost by 3 to Lehigh out of the Patriot League. So I could see them maybe losing by 13 or something like that. It might be closer than we think, but I'm definitely taking Rhode Island here for sure.
All right. Next up, we have Maine visiting Merrimack. Both teams are coming into this one 1-2. As we mentioned earlier, Warriors coming in off a 31-21 win over Bucknell. The Black Bears are coming in off a tough home loss to Monmouth, 51-22. Look, this Maine team is puzzling to me. 2 weeks ago, they went out there and they lost 41-24 to a nationally ranked Montana State team, a very good Montana State team, and they hung in there and they played a good competitive football game. Then there's this last week. I don't know what Maine team we're going to get. Right now, I have Maine favored in this one by 3.5. I'm going to pick Maine here. I think they win by a touchdown. But that offense needs to get going. I know that, they're trying to figure it out with Carter Peavy at quarterback, but there's too much skill there, especially at tight end and wide receiver. There's just too much skill there for this offense to be this inconsistent and not be as productive as they should be. I think they win this week, but this Merrimack team is certainly good enough to knock them off at Duane Stadium. Like I said, I think that Maine wins, but I think it'll be close. I do think they cover. I think they win by 7 or 10. Give me the Black Bears in this one.
Agreed. I think that it's going to be a lot of people there. I think this is, again, one of the bigger opponents that are ever, I think, visiting Merrimack. So I'm taking Maine as well. I think this is going to be kind of like a get-right game. I think they're going to be pretty pissed after last week, thinking it was going to be a lot closer. So, yeah, definitely give me the Black Bears.
Yeah, and Dartmouth is going to visit Merrimack as well. Merrimack's playing a great schedule this year, man. I mean, they're an independent, but kudos to that administration. They recognize the value of college football. They recognize the value of playing these games and what it means to the profile of the program. I love their schedule. I can't say enough good things about what they're trying to do there with the program. All right, next up we have Bryant visiting UNH. Bryant comes in at 1-2. UNH is 2-1. The mythical number for this game is going to be Wildcats by 9.5.
Yeah, I'm taking them all day. I think they're finding their stride. I think they're going to hit the bye week with another win. I think if Bryant keeps it close, it's going to be a little bit at the beginning, but I do think that UNH will pull away at the end.
Yeah, look, I think Bryant can play tough early like they did last week against Holy Cross, but I think in the end, I think, you bring up a great point about them finding their stride offensively. Seth Morgan is settled in now, and that offense is always going to be a quarterback-friendly offense. It was that when Chip Kelly was there and Ricky Santos played for him. It's been that for Sean McDonald and the various coordinator and quarterback combinations he's had through the years. And now with Santos as the head coach, you saw with Max Brosman the last few years. Now with Seth Morgan, I mean, it's a quarterback-friendly system. Quarterbacks can put up big numbers in this offense, whether they're running the spread or the modern West Coast offense, which they're running now. I think Bryant can play tough early, but I think ultimately UNH, too much big playability. I mean, that receiving core is terrific. Arguably, they could be the best in the CAA. I think Bryant's going to have a hard time matching up long-term in this game. I think ultimately UNH wins this game and they cover that number. I think they win by 14, and I think that they improve to 3-1 as they head into their break. All right, Ivy League kicks off this weekend, and we haven't had a chance to talk about these programs, but we will now. Let's start with Harvard at home. They host Stetson. The number on this one would be Harvard by 7.5. Of course, the Crimson have a solid backfield returning led by Shane McLaughlin and Xavier Bascon. A solid defense as well. Good skill group, Andrew Orridge. His first game as the head coach of the Crimson. First time A new coach is roaming the sidelines in Cambridge in the last 30 years. The great Tim Murphy, of course, retired after last season. I'm going to go Harvard here. I like the number that I just came up with, 7.5. I think they take care of business versus Stetson.
Yeah, two of their wins are against, I think, Division II programs, looking at it real close. So definitely taking Harvard. I think they're going to start the new era with a bang. And I wish this was a regional
Not to
team.
cut you off, they lost 48-7 to Furman.
Okay.
And they beat Warner 35-0. And they beat Ava Maria 41-3. Poor Ava Maria.
Right. Yeah, that's what maybe I misspoke there. Yeah, their two wins are against those programs that I never heard of
either programs. So.
Yeah, there we go. That I never heard of. I don't know if they're NAIA or whatever.
I think they're made up. I think ESPN made them up.
Literally, they sound made up. They sound like if you didn't have the rights to the EA college football game and they were just like making comps, and they were just like, yeah, Ave Maria sounds like Boston College. Sure, yeah.
Ave Maria. Did I say? What did I say? Ava Maria.
I don't know.
Ave Maria.
Yeah, no, I'm a bad Catholic. I'd probably be getting it wrong. So yeah, I think that
whatever, man. I'm a bad Orthodox.
Yeah, they take it. I think Harvard takes it fairly easily. I think they, 36-7. I don't know. I would even move this up to 14.5. I'm being super overconfident here, but I just think that they're going to start this era off right.
Yeah, and if that Furman game was any indication, I mean, Harvard should take care of business.
Yeah.
Orridge kept most of the staff, so the systems are going to be the same. I don't expect much turnover there. I think Harvard's the best team going into the season in the Ivy League. It'll be interesting to see if they can live up to that. Again, Penn and Princeton will have something to say about it, as will Yale, as will Dartmouth. Either way you look at it, it's the Ivy League. We're going to have a great finish because we do every year.
Right.
All right, next up we have Brown visiting Georgetown. James Perry's Bears return a bevy of skilled players on offense. They return an experienced offensive line. They return a defense headlined by cornerback Isaiah Reed, who's a preseason All-American and preseason All-Ivy League. He's also on several watch lists, including the Senior Bowl watch list. They take on a Georgetown team coming off a 40-14 loss to Sacred Heart. The Hoyas did start the season 2-0, but look, this is, for Brown, they need this one because next week they host Harvard. So they need to get off to a good start here with Jake Wilcox back, talented receiving core led by Ty Pezza, Stockton Owen at running back. You got Jack Conley, Hayden Bozich along that offensive line. Brown should take care of business here. The line on this one is Brown by 7. I think they cover no problem.
Yeah, I'm taking that as well. I think my faith was shaken in Georgetown being decent enough after losing so bad to Sacred Heart last week. Again, all due respect to Sacred Heart. But the Hoyas started off pretty decent before that. So yeah, I think Brown gets things started off well too. I think it's, I think they're finished to pick like 5th or 6th in the Ivy. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So definitely kind of tough with the amount of talent in their conference, but I think that they have a lot of returning pieces to make some noise this year. So let's go Brown.
All right. Dartmouth kicks off their season after winning a share of the Ivy League last year. Quarterback Jackson Proctor is back for the Big Green. They also have a stout defense back for Sammy McCorkle. They will host Fordham out of the Patriot League, and the line on this one is Dartmouth by 6.5. I like the Big Green in this one. Again, after last season, watching this team play with the level of emotion that they did, and to see them go on that late season run and take care of business and get a piece of the Ivy League pie, that was pretty impressive. I was there when they beat Brown the last weekend of the regular season. It was fantastic. They just watching the players, waiting around to get the Harvard-Yale score. It was awesome. It was awesome to see. It's why Ivy League football is one of my favorite things we do. But I think that the Big Green take care of business here and start their season off on the right foot with a win over Fordham.
Yeah, and similar to kind of the Sacred Heart thing with Fordham, I thought Fordham was going to be a lot stronger this year with CJ Montez and co, but they have been pretty disappointing starting the season 0-3. I think Dartmouth come into this motivated, rested. Fordham are kind of coming into this, limping a little bit. So let's take the Big Green for sure.
And finally, Yale is visiting Holy Cross in what is one of the best games of the college season year in and year out. The Bulldogs did announce Grant Jordan will be their starting quarterback this season. He replaces Nolan Grooms, who was one of the best signal callers in New England the last 2 years. But look, this offense is going to run through Joshua Pitzenberger in that running game. Bulldogs are going to be pretty good. You also have a bunch of talent back on the defensive side of the ball. They got to replace some big-time production offensively with Grooms and Tipton, but it's Yale. One thing we know about Tony Reno and his staff is they recruit well and they develop talent well. I have no doubt in my mind, Ryan, that the Bulldogs are going to be in the mix in the Ivy League when the dust settles. They'll have a shot to win at least a piece of it, like they have done, like they did last year, won it outright a couple years ago. But I think this will be a great game, a tough one to pick because I think Holy Cross might be starting to hit their stride. Again, losing Fuller hurts, but you do have Clairvaux stepping in for him, and he had a big game last week against Bryant. A lot of new faces for Yale. Holy Cross is favored in this one by 3.5, but I'm going to take the Bulldogs as the dog in this one. I think they find a way to win a close one, a 20-17 kind of game.
So maybe just to be a somewhat contrarian, I think because Holy Cross won last week, I'm going to take the Crusaders to kind of find their stride. I think that, there's as much as there is coming back for the Bulldogs, I think they still need to figure some things out. So I'm going to go with the Crusaders here as they kind of right the ship and figure things out. And if this is a game that Yale's going to lose this season, it's not going to affect the Ivy League schedule. It's at the end of the day. So I think it's just a tough matchup to start with. So I'm going to go with the Holy Cross.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really good game, like it is every year between these programs. And finally, we have a Sacred Heart visiting Easton to take on Stonehill on Saturday. Stonehill is mythically favored in this one by 3.5, which is surprising that Vegas, fake Vegas, would favor them by 3.5, considering they're undefeated. Actually, no, I read this wrong. I apologize. It's Sacred Heart who's favored by 3.5. That's not what I wanted to say. Sacred Heart. It's been a rough show for the host tonight. Couple stories. I mean, I'm just hosting too many shows. I'm just doing.
Yeah, you've got a lot going on.
I got another one tomorrow night, man. This story of my life. All I do is host live streams.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're interested in hiring me to host your live stream, hit me up on X. I'll be glad to host your live stream. I'm sure my wife will love me hosting another live stream or two during the week. Yes. Anyway, Pioneers are favored by 3.5. What do you got here?
Honestly, I don't know. I thought Stonehill was going to be a little bit better. They're reeling off of last week, but yet Sacred Heart looked a lot better than we thought. I think I'm going to take the Pios here. I think it'll be a close game, but I'm going to go with the Pios because of what they showed last week and what we saw out of Stonehill in the last 2 weeks. Getting blown out by UNH almost makes sense, but getting blown out by Stony Brook, I think was kind of what which shook a lot of faith in me. So I'm going to take Sacred Heart here.
Yeah, I covered this game last year. They played at Stonehill last year as well. I'm going to go with Sacred Heart in this one too. I think that they have finally found a rhythm offensively, and we know that this program is going to play good defense. We say it all the time. They're going to play D. It's a matter of can they figure it out on offense. They lost a lot of key guys from last year's team: Malik Grant, Arsheen Giles, Carson Primrose. But Mark Knopfrey and his staff have done a great job replacing those guys. They took advantage of having 3 home games, played Delaware State tough, could very easily be 3-0. I'm going with the Pios in this one. I think Stonehill is young. I know that Eli Gardner likes a lot of the young pieces on this team. Asher Karaha, one of the better quarterbacks in New England. He has certainly done his part, but he hasn't had a lot of help. And I think a lot of it is their skill group is really young. They're young at receiver. Replacing Corbett is tough. They're trying to do it with Jarrell Washington and Xavier Woodward. But they're going to have their hands full. And I think this is the Sacred Heart team could surprise people this year. Again, like I said earlier, it's unfortunate that they're an independent because they could have been a player in the NEC. But I am with you. I think they win this one and they cover. All right, Ryan, any final thoughts here before we wrap it up?
No, I a lot of great games this weekend. It's exciting that the Ivy League's back. We're seeing a lot of teams playing each other this weekend in New England, which is exactly how it should be. So, but not to always bring it back to UMass, but I'll tell you, if they lose, it'll be a hell of a show next Wednesday. That's for sure. But there's a lot of other great games happening.
When you say it'll be a hell of a show, please elaborate.
I just think there'll be a lot to talk about, as far as,
I see. I'm hoping we get a Ryan Barry meltdown.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's I don't know if I said this last week on the show or not. I can't remember, but I came home from the game and a couple weeks ago, and all despondent and whatever, and
Oh, your
I
wife's line, it was fantastic.
yeah, and she said, if it was like a friend, she would tell me to stop hanging out with them. And she said that again Saturday after, I was watching the game at the beach on my phone and I came back, so I went to go swimming, and then I came back and they were down 34-3. I'm like, what the hell happened? I was gone for like 15 minutes, so yeah, but I'm excited. There's a lot of good stuff coming up this weekend. Again, it's not all about them. There's a lot of great games going on.
And I do want to remind you, we know you can get football coverage anywhere else, whether it be Patriots, college, high school, but this weekend is a reminder of why we think we provide some of the best college football coverage and football coverage in general, but certainly the best college football coverage in New England. We're going to be covering the Michigan State BC game. We'll be at FAU UConn. We'll be at Central Connecticut UMass. We'll be at Bryant UNH. We'll be at Yale Holy Cross. We'll be at Maine Merrimack, Sacred Heart Stonehill. I mean, again, to me, and I say it all the time, we love what we do. It's a labor of love. We bust our asses to provide this content, but you're not going to find better Division I New England college football coverage than us. So that's why please subscribe. Go to anyfootballjournal.com. Go to the membership tab. Subscribe. You're not going to regret it. We're all football all the time. There is no offseason for us. We're not moving on to another sport come December. We're going to be doing football. We'll be doing recruiting talk. We'll be doing NFL playoffs. Hopefully the Patriots surprise people. But we've got a whole bunch of coverage. But this weekend is proof why we think we're the best in New England when it comes to football coverage. And we know you have plenty of other great options. Believe me, we know, especially when it comes to the Patriots. There's a ton of great options in New England. We're one of those options. But when it comes to college football and high school football, we believe we do it about as well as anybody. So make sure that you subscribe and follow along. We greatly appreciate your business. It allows us to get to as many games as possible. Ryan, thanks for taking the time, man. Greatly appreciate it as always. And let's do this again next Wednesday.
Yes, indeed. We'll see you then, John. Excellent
All right.
points.
Thank you. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the College Football Preview Show. For Ryan Barry, I'm John Serenitas. Till next Wednesday, peace izzle.